I thought I trusted her with everything: my life, my finances, even my therapy sessions. But she used my identity to commit fraud, dragged innocent children into her schemes, and betrayed everyone who believed in me. This is the story of the nightmare that destroyed my family and friendships, and how I fought back. The first time I realized my entire life was being stolen, I was standing in a crowded school gymnasium, holding a paper cup of burnt coffee that tasted like ash. Parents were cheering for their kids on stage, balloons squeaking against each other, and all I could hear was a voice on the phone telling me I owed $28.47 on a credit card I never opened. My hand shook so badly that the coffee slushed over the rim, staining the torn receipts crumpled in my pocket. That was the moment everything clicked: the lies, the missing mail, the way Isabella always grabbed the bills before I could check the mailbox. But by then, it was already too late. Isabella wasn't just my girlfriend. For 4 years, she was my partner, my anchor, the person I defended when friends whispered about her shady job consulting for startups. I met her at a weekend morning charity event on campus. She had that laugh, the kind that made people turn their heads, and I was hooked. We moved in together a year later, into a crappy little duplex at 1529 Westwood Avenue. At the time, I thought I was building a future. I remember the smell of our house more than anything now. There was always this faint white dog smell, even though we didn't own a pet. She said it was from the old carpet, but looking back, it was like everything around her carried a layer of rot I refused to notice. The first real red flag came one Sunday. I woke up to the sound of her on the phone, whispering in the kitchen. It was around 7:12 a.m, and the toaster had burned my breakfast again, filling the room with a bitter smell of charred bread. She didn't notice me standing there. "Yeah, I have his SSN, don't worry about it," she murmured, her back to me. When I asked who she was talking to, she smiled too quickly and said, "Just my cousin, chill, Nick." I let it go. I always let it go. Oliver, my younger brother, tried to warn me. He hated Isabella from the start. "She's too slick. Man, you ever notice how she never posts about you on her socials? She's hiding something." I brushed him off. Oliver had always been overprotective, the type to grill any girl I brought home. Besides, Isabella had this way of twisting things, so I ended up feeling guilty for even questioning her. But the day in the school gym, the one where the fraud call shattered everything, I saw Oliver's face in the crowd, and for the first time, I felt the weight of his warnings. He waved, oblivious to the storm raging inside me, while kids sang off key on stage. After the event, I confronted Isabella. She rolled her eyes, sitting cross-legged on our sagging couch. "Babe, relax. Identity theft calls are scams themselves. You're paranoid." But my gut told me different. My stomach churned, that burnt toast taste lingering in my mouth. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every weird moment: the torn receipts she shoved in my pockets when I picked her up from work dinners, the time she insisted on handling my bank login because she was better with numbers, even the way her friends looked at me with pity when I tagged along. Still, I wanted to believe her. Love makes you blind in ways therapy books don't warn you about. The first domino fell a week later. I got a letter Internal Revenue Service, January 17, 2022, saying my tax return had already been filed. I me, except I hadn't touched it yet. I felt my chest tighten as I held the paper, like the walls of our duplex were shrinking around me. Isabella walked in, glanced at the letter, and said, "Oh, must be some clerical error." Something inside me cracked that day. I didn't realize then how deep the betrayal went, or how many people were tangled in her web. But that weekend morning, standing in that school gym with burnt coffee and shredded receipts in my hand, I finally admitted to myself I was living with a stranger. And the stranger was stealing my life. The days after that IRS letter felt like I was living underwater, sounds muffled, movements heavy, everything distorted. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, my chest tight, convinced someone was standing in the room. The PTSD nightmare started immediately after that call in the school gym. Always the same, me opening the mailbox, only for hundreds of torn receipts and court summons to pour out until I was buried alive. I told Isabella I wanted to check my credit report. She laughed. "Nick, you're seriously losing it. Do you think I'm out here taking loans in your name?" The way she said it, mocking, dismissive, made me feel small. But she also hugged me afterward, pressed her head against my chest like nothing was wrong. That push and pull rewired my brain. I started doubting myself instead of her. Still, I couldn't ignore the cracks. After I got promoted at work, June 2022, junior project manager at Riverbend Tech, the HR lady pulled me aside. "Hey, Nicholas, we need to talk about a discrepancy." She held a folder like it was radioactive. Inside were credit checks, and right there was my name attached to accounts I never opened. A Chase card, a loan application, even a PayPal credit line maxed out at $1,200. I felt my throat go dry. "That's not mine," I stammered. She gave me this long, pitying look. "I believe you, but you need to fix this. It could impact your employment record." I walked out of the building that day feeling like everyone could see the fraud written on my forehead. That's when my coworker James, the guy I'd barely spoken to before, caught up with me in the parking lot. He lit a cigarette, exhaled, then said, "Listen, I shouldn't even say this, but I've seen your girlfriend hanging around places she shouldn't. Heard some things." I frowned. "What do you mean, heard some things?" He hesitated. "There's talk she's tied up with people running scams. If I were you, I'd watch my back." I wanted to punch him for suggesting it, but his words stuck like glass in my brain. At home, Isabella was all smiles. She made spaghetti, poured wine, and asked about my promotion. I stared at her across the table, the wet dog smell of the carpet seeping up, and thought, is she celebrating with me, or celebrating what she's stolen? That night, I searched our shared desk drawers when she showered. In a folder marked utilities, I found copies of my social security card and driver's license scanned, printed, and highlighted. My heart dropped into my stomach. I shoved the papers back, terrified she'd catch me, but the confirmation was there. I didn't sleep. Every creak of the house sounded like her footsteps. Every buzz of my phone made me think the police were about to knock. The panic attack started then. Once, at the gym, I collapsed on the treadmill, clutching my chest because I thought I was dying. When I opened my eyes, people were staring and whispering. I could hear one guy mutter, "That's the guy in debt, right?" My face burned hotter than the sweat dripping down my temples. I stopped going after that. Public spaces felt unsafe. My brother Oliver noticed. "You're fading, man," he told me one weekend morning when we grabbed breakfast. I couldn't even eat, the taste of burnt toast stuck in my mouth like ash. He leaned in and said, "I don't care if you hate me for saying this, but she's destroying you. And if you don't leave, she's going to take everything." I wanted to argue, but I just stared at the torn receipts I'd pulled from my pocket earlier. Crumbled proof I couldn't ignore it anymore. One night, I confronted Isabella with the scanned documents. She didn't flinch. She just sighed, like I was boring her. "You really think I'd ruin you, Nick? People out there are way worse. You should be thanking me for managing all this." "Managing what?" I snapped. My voice cracked. She stood, grabbed her purse, and muttered, "You're too weak to handle real life, that's why you need me." Then she walked out. I sat there shaking, the wet dog stench filling the room, wondering how long she'd been planning my downfall and whether anyone would believe me when the truth came out. Because deep down, I knew James was right. This wasn't just about one girlfriend gone bad. This was bigger. And I was in the middle of it. The morning everything unraveled, I woke up with Isabella already gone. Her side of the bed was cold, sheets twisted like she'd wrestled them in her sleep. My phone buzzed at 8:03 a.m. another unknown number. "Mr. Warren, this is Detective Sanders with the Financial Crimes Unit. We need to speak with you about several accounts in your name. Are you available for questioning this afternoon?" The words blurred together. My tongue felt heavy, my palms clammy. "Wait, I'm not, this isn't me, my girlfriend." I stopped. The detective's pause was long, deliberate. "We'll discuss that at the station. Be here at 2:00 p.m. When I hung up, I vomited into the sink. My whole body trembled, like my nervous system had short-circuited. At the station, they showed me documents. My name, my social security number, my signature forged with sloppy confidence. But what gutted me most were the evidence of children's names listed as dependents, children I didn't have. The detective leaned across the table. "These kids' identities were used in fraudulent benefit applications. CBS is already involved." It felt like my chest caved in. "What the hell are you talking about? I don't have kids." He studied me, skeptical but not cruel. "We're investigating a ring. If what you're saying is true, you may not be the suspect. You may be the victim." For the first time, I admitted it out loud. "My ex Isabella, she has my information. She's capable of this." When I got home, Oliver was waiting on the porch, his face pale. "Nick, I don't know how to say this, but she's been seeing someone else, and not just anyone. She's been sleeping with your therapist." I froze. "My therapist? Dr. Lewis?" "Yeah." Oliver's jaw tightened. "I overheard James talking at work. He tried to warn you, but he didn't realize how deep it went." I felt like the ground dropped out beneath me. Dr. Lewis, the one person I trusted with the nightmares, the panic attacks, the constant fear. The man I'd sat across from every Tuesday at 10:00 a.m., confessing things I hadn't told my own family. All of it fed back to her. That night I couldn't breathe. I sat on the floor with my head between my knees, gasping like I was drowning. My brain screamed, "No one is safe. No one is trustworthy." I stopped therapy immediately, but the damage was done. Every conversation replayed in my head, the way Dr. Lewis asked for details about my finances, the strange way he probed about Oliver and my workplace. He wasn't helping me heal. He was helping her tighten the noose. The PTSD worsened. Nightmares turned into full-on hallucinations. I'd wake up convinced I saw Isabella standing at the foot of my bed, smiling that same dismissive smile. My body shook uncontrollably, drenched in sweat, while the wet dog smell of the carpet seemed to seep into my lungs. Socially, everything crumbled. People at the gym avoided me. At work, whispers followed me down the hallway. "That's the guy under investigation." Even old friends stopped answering my calls. I'd walk into the grocery store and feel eyes tracking me, like my shame was public property. The final straw came at a school event, the same kind of place where this nightmare began. A mom I'd known since childhood leaned over to whisper, not quietly enough, "That poor guy, he's the one who defrauded those families." I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab her shoulders and shout, it wasn't me. But all I could do was stand there, nails digging into my palms until I drew blood. By then, Oliver was my only lifeline. "Nick, listen," he said one night, handing me a folder. "I've been digging. You're not her first. She's done this before, different towns, different names. There are other victims." I stared at the evidence, printouts of news articles, court records, even a Facebook group where people were warning each other about Isabella under her alias Marissa K. The bile rose in my throat. I wasn't just unlucky. I was prey in a system she'd perfected. That realization broke something in me, but it also lit a fire. I couldn't just be the victim she left in ruins. I had to fight back. But first, I had to survive the confrontation that was coming. Because Isabella wasn't going to let me go quietly. The day I confronted Isabella publicly, it was raining lightly, turning the sidewalk slick. I had an interview at 9:30 a.m., March 15, 2023, for a senior project manager position at a tech firm I'd dreamed about. I walked in with a portfolio of accomplishments and a mind racing with evidence I had collected for months. Isabella appeared in the lobby. She had that same fake smile plastered across her face, like a predator spotting prey. My stomach twisted, but this time I didn't back down. The hiring manager, Mr. Caldwell, extended his hand. "Nicholas, welcome." I swallowed, ignored the fire of panic in my chest, and shook it firmly. Then she stepped forward, pretending to be a recruiter or colleague. I took a deep breath. "Mr. Caldwell, before we start, there's something you need to know." I pulled out my folder with scanned ID, fraudulent credit card statements, torn receipts, evidence of her using my information, even the CPS reports. My hands trembled, but my voice didn't. Isabella's eyes flicked over the folder. A smile folded. These documents show that this woman I pointed has been committing identity theft in my name, opening accounts, filing fraudulent benefits, and even using children's information illegally. I am the victim. The room went silent. Mr. Caldwell leaned back. Joe Slack. I don't believe it. She's done this before, I continued, flipping through pages. Other victims exist. I have the evidence. My own therapist, Dr. Lewis, colluded with her. This is real. I can prove it. Isabella's face turned pale, the first crack in her confident facade. She tried to step forward, but I held up a hand. Don't. Just don't. I will go to the authorities, and I will show everything. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it nervously. Then she bolted. I felt a mix of rage and relief as she disappeared into the storm outside. The fallout was immediate. Mr. Caldwell called the police right after our interview. HR and legal teams from my former workplace began coordinating. Within hours, detectives were at her apartment, finding more fraudulent accounts, falsified documents, and evidence of her illegal schemes involving multiple victims. Oliver and I sat on my couch, eating burnt toast in silence, listening to the news report blaring from the TV. Local woman arrested in multi-state identity theft ring. My chest finally began to unclench, the wet dog smell of the carpet less suffocating. Socially, reactions were wild. My coworkers were shocked and apologetic. We had no idea, James said quietly. I tried to warn you. His words were heavy with guilt, and I realized even the smallest hesitations in trust could ripple like a shockwave. The gym was another story. People still stayed, whispered. But now, instead of shame, I felt a flicker of vindication. They had assumed I was guilty, now they saw I was the one wronged. But the psychological impact lingered. PTSD nightmares didn't vanish overnight. I still woke screaming, drenched in sweat, convinced someone was watching me from the shadows. Panic attacks hit without warning, even in broad daylight. I started seeing a new therapist, Dr. Reynolds, who didn't collude, and began cognitive behavioral therapy. I learned grounding techniques, slowly rebuilding trust in my own perception of reality. Even then, trust was fragile. I couldn't call anyone my confidant without testing their loyalty, and every text or phone call made me scan for hidden motives. But slowly, I started to see the world not as a trap, but as something I could navigate. The final twist came when I discovered her prior victims' people in forums, Reddit threads, even anonymous posts detailing the same tactics Isabella had used. I realized I wasn't alone, and my anger turned into purpose. I contacted law enforcement and testified in multiple cases against her. With all of his support, I helped other victims gather evidence, guiding them through the nightmare I'd survived. That day in the interview lobby, facing her directly, had been the moment I reclaimed my life. The humiliation, the panic, the betrayal, it was still there, but it no longer had power over me. I gave everything to someone who left me with nothing. But in reclaiming my truth, I rebuilt not just my life, but the lives of others she had shattered. After the court case began, reality hit me like a freight train. Even though Isabella was in custody, I felt like I was unraveling. I woke at 3:17 a.m., drenched in sweat, trembling, convinced I could hear her whispering through the walls. The PTSD nightmares had evolved, and now they were cinematic, full of shadows, forged documents flying toward me, my children's identities being stolen while I screamed helplessly. I stopped leaving the house. The burnt toast I made every weekend morning sat uneaten, the smell of charred bread reminding me of the mornings where my life felt safe. I couldn't shower without panicking, convinced someone had tampered with my water, or worse, that Isabella had broken in. The wet dog smell in our old duplex seemed to linger, an invisible marker of everything she had done. Therapy helped, but it was torture. Dr. Reynolds, the one I had started seeing after discovering Dr. Lewis's betrayal, pushed me to relive memories I wanted to bury. Each session was like being ripped open. I cried through entire hours, trembling under the weight of betrayal not just by Isabella, but by someone I trusted with my darkest fears. Yet each session also slowly rebuilt me, teaching me to trust my own perception, my own judgment. Socially, it was a nightmare. Even after exposing Isabella, whispers followed me. At the grocery store, parents with children stared, unsure if I was a threat. At the gym, eyes darted, and subtle murmurs that the guy haunted me. I stopped attending social events. Invitations went unanswered. My friends, unsure of what to believe, drifted away. My reputation was shattered. The community's judgment felt inescapable. Financially, the fallout was suffocating. The $2847 in fraudulent credit card debt had left me drained. Banks were hesitant to reverse charges. Collections agencies hounded me relentlessly. I carried torn receipts in my pockets as proof of her crimes, but every encounter with a clerk, a collector, or even a friend reminded me of the chaos she caused. The moment I hit rock bottom came one rainy afternoon in September 2023. I had been awake for 48 hours, shuffling through court documents in a haze. My phone rang, a CPS investigator asking for clarification on children she had falsely claimed as dependents. My hand shook violently, sending papers flying across the floor. I sank to my knees, breathing shallow, hyperventilating. Oliver found me like that, curled on the carpet, shaking, defeated. "Nick, you're not alone in this," he said, his voice low and steady. But the words felt hollow. Everything felt hollow. Even therapy sessions felt like torture. I would recount the incidents, the betrayal of my own therapist, Isabella's manipulations, the mounting debt, the whispers at the gym. Each story reopened wounds. I was trapped in a cycle of panic attacks and sleepless nights. Then came the most devastating blow. I discovered Isabella had tried to contact some of her other victims online, attempting to intimidate them into silence. Her network of lies extended further than I imagined. I realized the trauma wasn't just mine, it had been methodical, calculated, and ongoing. I felt powerless. For weeks I considered giving up entirely. Moving away, disappearing, pretending none of it had happened. But something in me refused. The rage, the betrayal, the humiliation, all of it became fuel. I couldn't undo the past, but I could prevent her from hurting anyone else. The last nights before the trial were sleepless. I documented every incident meticulously, torn receipts, emails, bank statements, screenshots of fraudulent accounts. I reviewed therapy notes that Dr. Lewis had reported back to her, catalogued every lie, every manipulation. I realized that while my mental state was fragile, my resolve was stronger than ever. By the time the trial began, I was a shell of the man I used to be, worn, scarred, cautious, but I had a mission. The weeks of isolation, public shame, and betrayal had forged me into someone determined not to let fear control my life. The aftermath of this stage of trauma was brutal, but it also marked the beginning of recovery. I started to recognize small victories, a day without nightmares, a day without panic attacks, even a day where I could face strangers without flinching. Each moment, no matter how minor, reminded me that survival didn't mean surrender. And even in the depths of rock bottom, I knew Isabella had taken everything she could. What she hadn't anticipated was that I would rise, that I would fight not just for myself, but for everyone she had destroyed. Recovery didn't happen overnight. The first steps were the smallest, leaving the house for short walks, drinking coffee without gagging at the burnt toast smell, even daring to sit in a cafe where strangers could see me without panic surging through my chest. Each day felt like walking through a gauntlet, my mind replaying Isabella's betrayals, Dr. Lewis's collusion, the whispers at the gym, the false accusations to every memory a scar. But I kept moving forward. Therapy became my anchor. Dr. Reynolds guided me through trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, teaching me grounding techniques and journaling exercises. I started recording nightmares, dissecting triggers, and confronting them in a safe space. Panic attacks became fewer, nights of insomnia shorter. Slowly, I began trusting my own judgment again. The PTSD remained a faint echo of the chaos she had unleashed, but it no longer dictated my life. I took practical steps to reclaim my identity. I worked with banks, credit agencies, and law enforcement to close every fraudulent account, erase the $2847 debt Isabella had left behind, and rebuild my credit. Each successful reversal felt like a victory, a tangible reclaiming of my autonomy. Torn receipts I had carried for months became evidence of survival, proof that the nightmare had been real and that I had endured. Oliver was my constant companion through the process. We coordinated with CPS to ensure the children's identities she had used were cleared, and that no one else could be victimized. He helped me sift through every document, every shred of evidence, every post Isabella had tried to hide. His support was unwavering, and in his presence, I rediscovered trust, real trust. The next pivotal step was facing Isabella in court. I testified against her, detailing every deception, every illegal transaction, every act of manipulation. I described the stolen identities, the falsified accounts, and the way she had used my own therapist to tighten her hold over me. The courtroom was tense, Isabella defiant, but the evidence was undeniable. Your Honor, I said, my voice steady. She took everything from me, my finances, my trust, my peace of mind, but I'm here to make sure she can't do this to anyone else. Seeing her sentenced to years in prison was a strange mix of relief and disbelief. I had survived, and yet the weight of what she had done lingered. But survival turned into action. I reached out to other victims I had discovered online. We formed a support network, sharing stories, evidence, and resources. I helped victims navigate the legal system, rebuild their finances, and regain confidence in their own perceptions. For the first time, I wasn't just a survivor, I was an advocate. Financial stability came gradually. I focused on my career, excelling in leadership roles. After another promotion, I moved into my own apartment at 4821 Maple Drive, a space free of lingering smells, stolen memories, and betrayal. I decorated it with light and warmth, a tangible symbol of reclamation. Psychologically, I rebuilt my boundaries. I learned to recognize manipulation, to listen to gut instincts, and to value my own judgment above all else. Trust was still cautious, but deliberate and informed. Every conversation, every relationship became a choice, not a reflexive surrender to fear. The PTSD never disappeared completely, but the nightmares that once ruled me became less frequent. I had tools now, grounding techniques, therapy sessions, the support of loved ones, and the knowledge that I had survived the unimaginable. The final layer of recovery was empowerment. By testifying in court, sharing my story, and helping other victims, I transformed trauma into purpose. Isabella's shadow no longer controlled me, instead, it motivated me to ensure she could not victimize others. Every life I helped reclaim, every identity I protected, was a victory over the chaos she had tried to impose. Standing now, months later, I look back at the wreckage of my past not with despair, but with recognition of my strength. I gave her everything, and she left me with nothing, but I rebuilt for nothing, stronger and wiser. I forged resilience from betrayal, clarity from confusion, and hope from the ruins of fear. Today, my life is mine. I am cautious, aware, and empowered. I advocate for victims of identity theft, share my story openly, and mentor those facing similar chaos. Isabella is behind bars, her web of deception unraveling, while I continue forward not as a victim, but as a survivor, a fighter, and a guide for others who were once powerless. I survived her, and now I thrive.